Whenever you're ready.
All right, now you want serious now, right?
I got you. I remember that. Tell people to wake up. I mean, we're turning into a zone or something.
I think I can go there. All right, we ready? We're going? Howdy. I'm Jim Mars. I'm here to talk about some things, news that you need to have, news you can use, and news that you need to know about. Because if Charles Dickens was alive today, he again would say, this is the best of times, this is the worst of times. We have more access to information today than any time in human history, and yet nobody's using it. Everybody's twittering or getting on my face or whatever it is. And it's time for people to start paying attention, because what you don't know can hurt you. So let's talk about some topics today that you're probably unfamiliar with. You might even think are a little bit out in left field. But believe me, there are things going on in our galaxy and our solar system, and of course on our good old Mother Earth, that might astound you, amaze you, and cause your eyebrows to flutter. But these are things you need to know about, because they're going to affect us all. They are affecting us all. So let's take a look. I signed up for journalism to find out what's going on and try to tell it to the public. I was kind of shocked and surprised to find out that not only did I have to fight with corporate and political leaders who didn't want the truth out, then I had to fight with my editors who didn't want to get in trouble, didn't want to lose an advertiser. And then worst of all, I found there's a lot of people out in the public who say, I don't want to hear that, don't tell me that. Well, I'm here to tell you that, because you need to hear some things. You need to wake up, you need to get with the program. Every election since Barry Goldwater and Lyndon Johnson in 1964, I've always heard that this is a turning point, a crossroads in our history. It definitely is a turning point. We can go into an Orwellian future, or we can go into a future of peace and prosperity for everyone. But it's going to be up to you, okay? No longer can we leave it to our leaders, who we don't get to elect anyway. All you have to do is go check out voter fraud, computer voting, and you'll find out that they control the elections. They control what you see and hear. 5 corporations decide everything you see and hear in the major media, and I'm not just talking about news. I'm talking about cable, music, film, TV, satellite, cable, billboards, magazines, newspapers, you name it. 5 corporations with interlocking boards of directors. That means a handful of people control everything you see and hear. No wonder we have a dumbed down culture. The school system is not much better. Ever since the days that the John D. Rockefeller set up the American Board of Education and began to change the education system away from the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, to do we feel good about ourselves, and what can we do to enslave ourselves more to the government? Education system has gone downhill, and now it's time for individual Americans to start waking up, taking charge of their own lives, and banding together with all the fellow Americans. Think about Franklin Roosevelt when Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese in 1941. He went on nationwide radio and said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. Let's roll up our sleeves, let's get the job done. And that greatest generation did the job. Hey, are we that much worse off? Are we that much less than our parents and our grandparents? Let's roll up our sleeves and let's all band together. Red, white, yellow, I don't care. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care where you came from. If you're an American legally, then we're all Americans, we're all in this together, so let's just pull together. Now let's talk about some things that we need to know about. For one thing, the people who want to control us want more than that. They want to kill us. And I'm not just being rhetorical. The papers put out by the Club of Rome, Agenda 20 of the United Nations, the Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the basic problem in the world today is overpopulation, okay? They want to reduce the world's population by at least 1/3, maybe 2/3 of the Earth's population. That's a lot of folks. Well, how are you going to reduce that? You got to kill them off. Well, how are you going to do that? Hitler tried that, and it got him in big trouble, and we fought a world war. So they know better than try to round up people and just kill them. So what they're doing today is they're spraying us with chemicals. Don't laugh, it's happening. They are putting extremely dangerous stuff in our food and water. GMOs are destroying the environment. There are now studies showing that the die-off of the honeybee population is due to the pesticides that are being put out by big corporations like Monsanto, who has already caused the suicides of more than 20,000 Indian farmers after they sold them on the idea of using their herbicides and their genetically modified seeds, saying that it does not require as much water. Well, it required a lot more, and their crops failed and they committed suicide. This is happening in Africa. GMOs are being banned in Europe, and we ain't got sense enough to even look at them hard here because they control your government. They are putting other things in the water. How about fluoride? Fluoride is a toxic chemical. They figured this out in World War II. The Nazis put fluoride in the water of their concentration camps to keep the inmates passive and non-resistant. So when they all came over here under Operation Paperclip after the war, they convinced our would-be leaders that this is a good thing. They sold the ADA on the idea that it might stop a little bit of tooth decay between children in the ages of 6 and 12, so we need to put it in our whole water supply. So we're getting doused with sodium fluoride, okay? Fluoride, what's that in? You find most of Prozac, one of the most abused psychotropic drugs in America, is predominantly fluoride. Its technical name is fluoxetine. It's fluoride. Okay, so if you want to get numbed down, you have to go to a doctor, certified medical practitioner, get a prescription for Prozac. But if you're drinking city water that's fluoridated, you're getting the same stuff. We need to figure this stuff out. We need to know what's going on. And today, when there's starting to be a movement towards vegetarianism, towards free-range chicken, beef, and better quality foods, what's our government doing? Are they encouraging this? No, they're arresting people for trying to sell whole milk. It's incredible. You know, there is a whole hidden history to the human race. We're not sure where we came from. We're not even sure how we got here. The old school idea is that, you know, there was protozoa in the warm waters of early Earth, and then they finally evolved into multi-celled organisms, which then evolved into fish, which then crawled up on dry land, became amphibians, and then became dinosaurs. And then somehow or another they died off, and the mammals were left, and so they grew and became apes, and then the apes grew a little bit more and evolved into humans. And that is the theory of evolution. That is Darwinism, a theory which, by the way, is still in deep controversy and has never been proven. But history as we know it is incomplete. The basic questions of who we are, where we came from, and where we're going are still very much up in the air. We don't have the answers. But what we do know is the story we've been given is largely untrue. Basically, we were taught the theory of evolution, Darwinism, that man started as just multi-cell creatures in the ocean, which evolved into fish, which crawled out on dry land, became amphibians, which evolved into dinosaurs, which somehow or another died off, and then mammals took over, and they evolved into apes, and they evolved into man, modern man, and it's baloney. Because if evolution was true, there would be an unequivocal fossil record to prove the different stages of this evolution, and it's not there. So what happened? Well, let's go back to the earliest known writings of humans, the Sumerian tablets written by the people of Sumer that predated Egypt by several thousand years, and they wrote all this down like 3,000 or 4,000 years before the Bible was even written down. In fact, it's been definitely shown that the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, is a collection of these same Sumerian stories, simply retold and recast to the Hebrews of that time who began to write down the original Bible. Well, what did the Sumerians have to say? Well, they said 430,000 years ago, some folks came from the heavens, landed on the earth. They called them the Anunnaki, and that they began to colonize on the earth, and that at some point they decided they wanted a worker race, so they found some earth primitives located in Africa, and they tweaked with their DNA. Now, am I saying aliens created us? No. What I'm saying though is that someone tweaked with our DNA. They improved the breed, just like we do with horses and cows and sheep and dogs and cats. And they improved the breed, and all of a sudden we went from Neanderthal to Cro-Magnon or modern man. And that's why they've never been able to find that missing link. All right, now, up until now, you can find the story of these ancient Sumerian gods in the Encyclopedia Britannica. You can find the whole story. The only difference is that in the encyclopedia, and through most people would tell you, that's just mythology. They just made all that stuff up. Well, all you have to do is shift your thinking ever so slightly and say, well, maybe they didn't just make all this up. Maybe they were telling us what they knew to be true and what they knew to be history. It's really fascinating. For instance, in the Bible, there's lots of things written about these angels, messengers from God who came down from heaven. And they tell us what these angels did, but they never really describe who these angels were or what they looked like or what they wore. And why was that? Because they knew. They saw them. They were there. That would be like us talking about President of the United States to some future generation. We'd say, yeah, the president said this and he gave us this message, but we're not going to bother to describe him or his suit or his tie or his little American lapel pin, because we're all here, we all see it, we know what that looks like. And we all had that same experience. So we are now in a place where we need to start paying attention to these ancient stories and looking at the ancient sites located all around the world, which give us unequivocal evidence, compelling evidence, almost overwhelming evidence that at some point in the distant past of Earth, we were not alone on this planet. There were other intelligent beings here. And then all you have to do is go and check the legends of the Iroquois, the Aborigines of Australia, the Dogon tribe in Africa, all of these ancient peoples, and they all tell us the same story. South America, Quetzalcoatl, gods came from the sky and taught them language, writing, number systems, law. They educated them. We are children of the stars, one way or another, and it's time we understood that. So ancient sites all around the world give testimony to the fact that something was going on in our distant past that is beyond the capabilities of even modern man. Baalbek in Lebanon has massive stones weighing thousands of tons that it has been shown that modern equipment, while they might be able to lift one of these stones, there is nothing on the earth today that could actually move it somewhere. All right? Now we've got the Great Pyramid. We know about that. But what about the Great Pyramid in Eastern Europe? There's some controversy over this, but let's go take a look. Is there a giant pyramid in Eastern Europe, in Bosnia, that is larger than the Great Pyramid of Egypt? And what about the pyramids in China? They've got pyramids in China too, but the Chinese government has covered them with dirt, planted trees on them, said, no. Pyramids are just big triangular shaped hills. And of course we know about the pyramids in Central America, South America. So what we find is that there are pyramids all around the world. What were they? Were they tombs, as we've been told, although no one's ever been found buried in them? Were they places of worship? Or, as some scientists have theorized, were they energy generators? Were they used to generate energy and then transmit it around the world? Let's look into that. We'll find out why then that they have seemed to have found some metal conduits in the Great Pyramid. And we'll find out why that others say that this energy being used to send around the world may have even been used and weaponized, used as a weapon. We're going to find out some amazing things. What about Göbekli Tepe in Turkey? This is the oldest ruins ever found on the earth. And in these ruins there are carvings of strange animals and strange bird-like creatures. Were these things that actually lived, or again, were this simply the imagination of some primitive people? even though they, again, built with stone blocks, so heavy, so massive, and so well put together that I'm not sure modern science could even do that today. Karnak goes back at least 12,000 years, much older than when we were told civilization first started with the Egyptians and the Sumerians 5,000–6,000 years ago. This is in Brittany, in France. Thousands of stones lined up, and almost all of these structures have an alignment that matches to star systems. There was something about the heavens that attracted these people. Was it because they knew that's where the knowledge of these things came from? We'll look into that too. Atlantis, that fabled place that Plato wrote about and has been the object of so much controversy. Most people say, it's just his imagination. He was probably drinking too much. But then others feel like that they have found remnants of ancient civilizations around the world, and they each think they have found possibly the source of the story of the fabled lost civilization of Atlantis. There is a good compelling argument to be made that it might have been the Minoan civilization there in the Mediterranean, centered around the island of Crete and Santorini, and that it got destroyed when the big volcano on Santorini exploded. Others say no, it was an island in the Atlantic, and it sank. It was right in the middle of the Atlantic, somewhere in the perhaps the Azores or maybe a last remnant tip of where Atlantis was. Others say no, it was more in the Caribbean, around the area of Bimini, where they have found underwater columns and blocks that they say look like they could have been manufactured by intelligence. There is even a claim that perhaps Atlantis was in the South China Sea, and that there was a axis tilt of the earth and everything changed. This is also the argument of those who argue that Atlantis was probably actually Antarctica at one time, and then the poles shifted and it went to the bottom of the world, got covered with ice, and that's why we haven't been able to find Atlantis. Well, I'm here to tell you that after researching this for a good number of years, I think that they're all right, but they're all wrong. They are like the story of the blind men and the elephant. That story has it that the 7 blind men went to the zoo because they had heard tales of this wondrous beast called the elephant. Well, one got hold of his trunk and said, the elephant is like a hose, and the other got hold of his tail and he said, no, the elephant is like a rope. And the other one got hold of his ear and he said, no, the elephant's like a fan. And the other one got hold of his leg and said, no, he's like a column. And another one was feeling along his side and he said, no, he's like a wall. Well, they were all right, but they didn't get the big picture. And I think the same thing has happened with the story of Atlantis. I think what evidence tells us when you put it all together is that at one time in the far distant prehistoric past, there was a worldwide, highly technological civilization that has been lost, either through war or disasters or natural apocalypse, or maybe a combination of that. And folks, we are just now pulling ourselves up to the same technological level that those folks had, and this is why up till now we have not been able to recognize this technology even when we found it. I'm thinking particularly of the carvings in Egypt of the ancient people holding the long glass tubes with the cables running back to the Djed pillar, which they themselves said was their source of power. Now this, up until 1900, 1950 even maybe, could have been considered just sheer mythology. But now we know that you can have electronic devices, they can be plugged into power sources, and that they can move mountains and create things. So we're into a whole new era now, and it's time for us to start paying attention to the world around us and what's happened before us, so that we'll know where we're going as we move into this unknown future. And that's another thing in Seti's temple, I guess. They have a whole list of the kings. You go way back, and the whole list of the gods, they go all the way back. And they go back like 50,000 years. You know, and it's all right there. It's in stone, but nobody talks about that because that doesn't fit in.
50,000 years.
50,000 years.
by quite a bit. Anything
Yeah.
that they claim we have as history. So
Exactly. And yet we're told our history is only what, 8,000 years, 7,000 years, something like that. 7,000 years ago, there were just people scrabbling around, living hand to mouth over in the area of Egypt. And then what, 1,000 years later, they got this flourishing civilization. How did they get so smart so quick?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
They had concrete roads, plumbing.
Yep.
Air
That's
conditioning.
another thing people don't understand. They think like ancient Rome, probably everybody living in hovels, and actually most of the people were. But the rich people, the patricians,
Well, actually-
the ones with the right bloodline, they lived in big palaces with lots of servants, and they had running water and hot baths and toilet systems, and they were doing pretty good.
Actually, all of Rome had hot baths around.
That's true.
And
We go to the public baths.
That's right. And they burned down whole forests, keeping those the heat underneath the
Keeping it hot.
pools hot.
Mhm.
And servants down there to keep the stuff served.
And that's where they perfected bread and circuses, okay? Which is every weekend you go down to the Colosseum, not only in Rome, but every city had their own
Got your
Colosseum.
free bread.
And they give you some free bread and you get to watch the games. And I bet you anything they had betting. Everybody bet on the,
Of course it did.
bet on the jackpot or the
The fights, yeah.
what do they call it, the gambling thing in Texas.
Texas Hold'em.
Yeah, but what is it? It's the
Oh, the lotto.
the
jackpot.
lotto, the
Lotto,
lottery. Yeah, they all had the version of the lottery. Okay,
I'm sure.
so today it's not bread and circuses. It's welfare and television.
There you go.
But it's the same thing, same principle. You keep everybody distracted, and you keep them where they got something to eat, and then they might grumble and gripe, but they're not going to do anything. And doing all my research, I found several cases where of premature death, people whose death was reported but might not actually have happened. John Wilkes Booth, there is abundance of evidence to show he was not shot in that barn in Virginia, but instead committed suicide in 1909 in Enid, Oklahoma. Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid, they paid off the Bolivian army to say that they had killed him, so they could come back and live a life without being hunted by the law. There's even evidence to show that John Dillinger, Public Enemy #1, may have arranged his own death outside the Biograph Theater, and someone else was killed, and he actually went on to live a life. Same thing with Jesse James. But these are all, of course, controversies because they contradict conventional history. But the point here is that in the past, if you got tired of your life, or you were in trouble, or you decided you just wanted to start over, you could move. You could go further west, or you could move to another country. You could give a false name, and you could just start over. Today, we can't do it. Today, we are already in George Orwell's computerized totalitarian state. Now you can't drive through an intersection without them taking your picture. You can't walk on the street without the government taking your picture. But in great irony, if you take a picture of a policeman on the street in performance of his duty in a public place, you can be arrested. How much sense does that make? It's incredible what's going on. We are now stapled, pinned, punched, mutilated, and we are now subjects of the state. You can't do anything. I know when my daughter tried to enter college, they wanted my Social Security number. I said, well, I'm not going to college. No, but she can't go to college unless we have your number. And in fact, I still have my original Social Security card issued to me back in the 50s, and on the bottom it very plainly states, not for identification. And yet today, if you don't give that Social Security number, which is your computer number, you can't do anything. You can't get a bank account. You probably can't get a job. We are numbered and pinned and computerized to the nth degree. Is this really what we want? Is this the freedom that our forefathers fought for? Let's reconsider some of this. And let's think about how we can have a little more freer society. And yet we cannot trust our leaders to do anything about this. George Bush came in talking about less government and gave us more government than we've ever had before. And then he's followed by Barack Hussein Obama, who promised us transparency in government and a kinder government and hope in government. And he has run up a bigger budget, more tighter controls, more war, and more loss of individual identity and freedom, and more prosecution of government whistleblowers than President Bush. So it doesn't matter. Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, all that's just dog and pony shows. What we need to concentrate on is freedom, individual freedom, not only for Americans, but for everybody in the whole world. And I know most people in the world may not be ready for that, but we had it. Now let's try to go for it again. This is Jim Marrs. And here's the clincher. I could give you all kinds of stuff, but the clincher is the mummified body of George St. Helen, who they carried around during the teens, offering $1,000 reward to anyone could prove it was not the body of John Wilkes Booth, and nobody could prove it. In fact, I got a Reader's Digest article from way back there where a guy who had been in a sword fight, practicing a sword fight with John Wilkes Booth, and he accidentally cut him over the right eye. And he said, there'll be a scar over the right eye, and I said, I want to collect my money. Well, they checked the body, and there was a scar over the right eye, so he didn't get to collect his money. But the clincher was in 1931, the woman who ended up owning this mummified body took it to the Cook County Coroner's office in Chicago. They performed an autopsy, and they said, well, history will have to make its own decision. But based on 8 known physical abnormalities, we say this is the body of John Wilkes Booth. It's amazing. Most of what we are taught is simply not true. It's just like we were taught that you can't go faster than the speed of light. And yet already there are some scientists who've said that they've gotten some photons to go faster than the speed of light. Of course, they're arguing about that too, but hey, come on. There's nothing that man can make that another man can't break, and that another man can't put back together again. We're a pretty inventive species, and we need to understand that and quit letting these jerks lead us around and rob us.
Who was it that said if your expert says it can't be done, get another expert?
That's right.
I think it was Moshe Dayan or something like that.
No, I tell you what, I learned that covering courts. You could have, the Cullen Davis trial, remember that one?
Yes.
I mean, here's 3 witnesses said that man shot me, and he still got off. Hey, when you got enough money to hire the best lawyers,